Everyone wants to see themselves on the big and small screen, whether that's a little blue-eyed, blonde-haired white girl or a teenage transgender man. Everyone deserves representation for others to see. After all, we are all real, and we need to show people that we exist, and we cannot be erased from the world, only to be revealed later on in life and treated like an abnormality. Hello, gals and pals, my name is Squeegee, and today I'm going to discuss with you some of my favorite queer characters on TV, and why I believe them to be incredible, and sometimes just okay, representation. Before I begin, I'd like to put a disclaimer here that I will be discussing the plot of I'm Not Okay With This, The Umbrella Academy, The Society, Shameless US, and Ouran High School Host Club. So, spoilers are definitely ahead. For trigger warnings, I will be discussing substance abuse, homophobia, cults, rape, transphobia, and biphobia. Lastly, I just want to say that this is my opinion, and by no means are you required to agree with it. These are just my own interpretations as a member of the LGBT+ community. Happy Pride Month, and let's get right into it. I'm Not Okay With This follows teenage girl Sydney and her struggles with being awkward and alone, while her lifelong best friend Dina ventures into new territories like dating boys. Oh yep, Sid also has telekinetic powers, but I'm not going to be talking about that much as the focus here is on Sid's role in representation. Anyone with eyes can look at Sid and see that she's not straight, but for now let's just ignore that for a few minutes and pretend that we are all oblivious straight people. The plot starts with Sid and Dina spending time together as usual. Dina begins seeing a jock-type guy named Brad, and Sid isn't happy about it. This could easily be interpreted as a friend just being concerned for Dina's safety with a bully, not trusting him. However, it's jealousy. Later on in the plot, Sid comes to the understanding that she's in love with Dina, and she was jealous of how Dina started paying more attention to Brad than to her. For the whole first season, Sid is portrayed as being very socially awkward, and just wanting to be normal. This results in Sid suppressing her feelings for Dina right up until the end of the season. She finally faces her feelings after Brad and Dina break up at a party, and Sid kisses her. At this moment, however, the kiss is not reciprocated, and Dina brushes it off. This is a hard blow to Sid, and she's deeply upset by it. But in the final episode, Sid and Dina are dancing together, and Dina expresses how she truly felt. She says she didn't not like it, which is proof enough for me that, damn, these bitches gay. I think Sid is impeccable queer representation because not only does it show a gender non-conforming lesbian character as a protagonist, she also has a clear development arc to do with her late father, her relationship with her mother, her friendship with Stan, and her connection to her little brother Liam. She has a whole story about her powers that I can't even cover because it doesn't relate to her rep, but it shows that you can have a queer character at the face of a story and also have it work next to an LGBT love story that could also work the exact same if Dina were a boy. Switch Dina and Stan and the story still makes half sense. This story does mainly revolve around this romance plotline, but the fact that it coincides properly with the supernatural storyline could work well with any sexual orientation shows that this show does not depend on performative LGBT representation to drive a romance plot along a fantasy plot. So overall, I think Sid is a great example of queer representation. I do have a fair number of things to say here, so I'll try to keep it simple and only talk about the canon queer characters in this show. A lot of things happen, and it would be impossible to cover all in this video, so I'll just stick to what happens to those couple of characters. First off, I wanted to talk about Klaus Hargreaves, also known as Number 4 or the Seance in Season 1. I talk about him first because he's the first canonically LGBT character introduced to the series. I think Klaus is a perfect example of not only pansexual representation, but also non-binary representation. According to Gerard Way, author of the Umbrella Academy comics, Klaus Hargreaves identifies as pansexual and non-binary. Klaus's gender expression is made abundantly clear to us that right from the first episode, as he wears boas, mesh crop tops, skinny leather jeans with lacing up the sides, and even prances about in his sister Allison's skirt for the whole first episode. Right away, Klaus is introduced to us as the gay one just from his wardrobe alone. Nothing is explicitly said about his sexuality or gender, but we can easily infer from how his siblings react. When he shows Allison him wearing her skirt, no one says anything. No one thinks it's weird that their brother is wearing their sister's clothes. Instead, they're more focused on the fact that he's not taking the funeral seriously, and he shouldn't be smoking or drinking in the house. In other words, the Hargreaves are aware of how Klaus likes to present, and we can assume that he presented this way from a young age, since they haven't spoken to each other in the last 15 years, and they still don't comment on anything being different. I'm caught up in the show as of June 2021, and from what I know in the show, they never do refer to Klaus with they/them pronouns, only he, him. However, in an interview, I believe Robert Sheehan, the actor who plays Klaus, used both he, him, and they/them for Klaus. To me, if an actor says it, it's canon. I don't care what you think about this. In season 1 and 2, Klaus also struggles with their relationship. Klaus accidentally time travels to the Vietnam War in the 60s because time police reasons, and there he has a canon romantic relationship with fellow soldier Dave Katz. However, in battle, Dave is shot and killed, leaving Klaus to go back to 2020 with his hands covered in his boyfriend's blood, an empty shell of who he used to be. This is a pivotal moment in Klaus's character as he becomes more sensitive and soft-spoken, opening up to his brother Diego about this on several occasions. This event also pushes him to get sober again, as his powers to see ghosts and summon them only work when he is not under the influence. He attempts to get sober again to summon Dave's ghost and see him again. He succeeds, and it's a beautiful moment, but the timeline gets corrected again and the day restarts. Klaus never having been sober again and never having summoned Dave. His relationship doesn't end here though, as in the second season, all the siblings are sent back to 1963, and Klaus finds a younger Dave working at a paint shop. He attempts to stop Dave from dying in the war by trying to persuade him not to enlist, but Dave's homophobic uncle sees him speaking and says some hurtful things, urging Dave to injure him. Dave follows his overbearing uncle's orders and punches Klaus, sending Klaus running out of the store, deeply hurt at the thought of being literally hate-crimed by the one person he loves. This shows the truth of the homophobia of the 1960s, and Klaus never really had to deal with that in 2020. He had a supportive family, but now he sees that not everyone gets that. This event causes Klaus to drink again, losing his sober streak. So, we know Klaus had relationships with men canonically, but what about women? After all, Squeegee, you said he was pan, huh? Where's the pan? Calm down, okay? I'm not going to speak much on it, since it's said in passing and it's not very important. But in season 2, we do learn that recently Klaus has had sexual relationships with some female members of his cult. I think that Klaus is a phenomenal representation, because there's nothing ever said that is wrong with his identity, until season 2, and even then it's only in one scene. That one scene is treated as a big deal, as it triggers a decline in Klaus's condition, and is framed to be upsetting. In Klaus's universe, homophobia is not a common thing, and we're taught that this is just normal for him and those around him. No one's awkward with his identity or uncomfortable, and his identity exists as its own plotline outside of the main plotline, which so far is independent from the LGBT stories. Next, we have the other canonically LGBT character, Vanya Hargreaves. In season 1, Vanya is shut out from the rest of her family, and she feels alone. She meets Leonard, a man a lot like her, who also feels shut out from his family, and they relate to each other. They form a relationship, and he often takes her side when it comes to arguments about the Hargreaves family. Vanya feels protected, and she feels safe with him. They end up being romantically involved, but Leonard does end up being the villain of this season, and Vanya stops being involved with him. This is many people's excuse for saying Vanya is straight or bisexual, but they don't understand why she was with Leonard. All the Hargreaves siblings were emotionally stunted as a result of their poor upbringing, and more or less, they all lacked social skills and understanding of what is right and wrong. In Vanya's case, she lacked an understanding of what she truly felt, romance or friendship. Vanya had never had a friend or a relationship, so I assume she just thought her feelings towards Leonard were romantic because of how he made her feel loved. But the reality is, she just felt grateful for how he made her feel accepted. We also never hear Vanya say anything heartfelt to Leonard, so it's best to assume she never had true feelings for him. However, in season 2, Vanya ends up with memory loss in the hands of a family in the countryside. There, she lives essentially as a nanny with Sissy, Carl, and their son Harlan. Carl is aggressive, to say the least. He has outdated views, but since it's the 60s, they're not really outdated, but by the way, they're not cool. He doesn't believe Sissy should ever have access to the car other than to do things for the family, doesn't wish her to leave the house while he's at work either. Sissy and Vanya grow close, and later in the series they develop a secret romantic relationship under Carl's nose. This relationship is incredibly different from Leonard, as it is properly developed, and there are many sweet scenes with the two of them discussing what they could do if life was different. They could get away from Carl. There is actually chemistry between them, and not only this, but Elliot Page, the actor who plays Vanya, has said in an interview that he believes Vanya is lesbian. Once again, if the actor says it, it's true. I don't care. Vanya is an incredible representation because it shows an explicitly WLW couple as the main relationship for this season, and they have great chemistry and are not sexualized in any way. They do experience homophobia from Carl when he discovers their affair, but like Klaus and Dave, it is treated as a no-no. Homophobia is not normal in the Umbrella Academy universe, and that is what makes Klaus and Vanya such great queer representation. I don't want to speak too long about this one since the script is already incredibly long, so I'll try to keep it short. I said that for the Umbrella Academy too, but look where we are now. The Society features several queer characters, but unfortunately there's not a lot of content to talk about since the show did get cancelled after just one season, and the queer relationships weren't a huge focal point for the show. To my memory, there is a lesbian couple that develops near the end of the season, but someone correct me if I'm wrong. Since I can't remember it that well, I'll simply say it was unremarkable and was another couple in a cesspool of soapy teen drama. However, I do want to talk about one of the ships of summer 2019 that at least rocked my world, Grizzam. The ship followed Grizz, a sweet jock on the softball team, and Sam, a soft-spoken, introverted deaf boy. Sam expressed his frustrations to his friend Becca that he was the only gay one in the group, but Becca reassured to him that there had to be others. This was foreshadowing, obviously, that Sam was going to get a love interest. He eventually forms a friendship with Grizz, and the two end up becoming boyfriends. I loved Grizz's character in this show, and he was everything I dreamed of at the time. He was poetic and often quoted poetry and Shakespeare to his friends who were too dim-witted to understand him. I know this is cliche, but it made him different. It hinted at him being different from the other guys right away, but the others never made him feel ashamed of his quirk. They laughed at it and appreciated it. Grizz doesn't seem hurt by it either. Even when he does come out to them, they are supportive and no one loses any respect for him. Sam is openly gay, so we don't have a coming out scene for him, but I gather everyone is supportive and no one has a problem with it. I also just really liked seeing Grizz trying his best to learn sign language just because Sam finds it easier to communicate that way. He got it wrong anyway, but he tried. I will comment on how the cast and producers did capitalize on the ship after it came to fandom, constantly posting stuff with hashtag Grizzam and related topics, and it bordered on queerbait and was a little creepy, kind of reminded me of Teen Wolf, but there's nothing really wrong with it, seeing that they truly are canon and the show got cancelled, so it doesn't really matter now. Shameless is a very long show that I definitely can't talk about the entire plot of in a short time frame like this, but I want to touch on what Shameless does right and what it does wrong in terms of LGBT representation. In the first couple of seasons, the most we get is Ian being gay and one girl coming on to Fiona, where Fiona does not reciprocate the feelings. However, I think they did a lot of great things with Ian's sexuality. The most prevalent queer relationship in the series would undoubtedly be Ian and Mickey's 10-season-long slow burn. Under no circumstances was it queerbait, it was just plot. Mickey had the most important representation in my mind, as he had the most struggles with his identity. In the beginning, he denied many times that he was even gay, a result of internalized homophobia from his family. However, we know he had to be MLM in some way, as he was secretly sleeping with Ian on the regular. Mickey had struggles with his sexuality for most of the show, as his father was dangerously homophobic, and Mickey also struggled with appearing stronger than he actually was. At one point, his father did beat him and Ian after catching them together and forced Mickey to have sex with a prostitute to, quote-unquote, fuck the faggot out of him. The prostitute ends up pregnant and Mickey has to marry her. They do end up getting a divorce later down the road, but this was a pivotal moment in their relationship. Mickey states that not everyone gets to be openly gay and this is just life and to get over it. Ian does not get over it. A party is held at the bar when people are celebrating Mickey's father getting released from prison, and Ian pushes Mickey to be himself and come out, and he does. Mickey comes out and, surprise, no one gives a shit. Well, except his father, who starts an incredibly violent fight and ends up getting sent back to prison right after he just got out again. Despite this, no one sees him differently, and this is a turning point in Mickey's character. He's now openly gay, much to the dismay of his father, who is threateningly violent towards him, even burning down the church Ian and Mickey are to get married in season 10. However, every one of Mickey's friends is there to support him and protect him, which I think is an important message to show. Even though homophobia is a very real and scary thing, you can defy it if you stand with support and you can protect yourself. If you have people who love you, you can be yourself without fear. There's only one recurring trans character in Shameless to my knowledge, and that would be Ian's season 7 love interest, Trevor. Trevor is a super important character to talk about because he introduces Ian and the others to a lot more LGBT themes that they didn't know about. He's patient with Ian when he doesn't understand the different identities and teaches him what he knows so that Ian can be a better ally. Trevor also has a short storyline in one episode where he is insecure about his ID, and he gets angry when the bar he tries to go to with Ian IDs people. Ian misunderstands and thinks maybe Trevor is actually under 21, but actually Trevor's ID has his biological sex on it, aka female and not male. This would cause him to be kicked out and not allowed in the bar. This is important to show because it shows that public places need to be more inclusive and welcome for trans individuals. There are several WLW relationships and characters in Shameless, as well as a polyamorous relationship that lasts a season or two, but I don't have much to say about them as they were more or less considered normal in the universe and they didn't have enough screen time to really talk about. However, I did want to speak about the blatant biphobia in this series that is never addressed. In a later season, Debbie starts to question her sexuality after having no success with men. She states that she thinks she still likes men, but she likes girls too. Ian scoffs at this and says she's not a lesbian. Debbie defends herself, saying she could be bi. Ian retaliates to this still, saying bisexuality isn't a thing, and you're either gay or straight. Granted, this was before he met Trevor, but it's not a cool thing to say, since he is a member of the community himself. Debbie's canon sexuality is left ambiguous, but she's definitely WLW. Ian is also biphobic towards his season 6 love interest when he's revealed to be cheating on Ian with a woman. This enforces the harmful stereotype that bisexuals are cheaters. Ian also believes now that this guy is straight, and this way of thinking is never corrected. Overall, I think Shameless does a great job with a lot of its representation, but before the show ended, I would have liked to see some more corrections made to its biphobic tendencies. Lastly, I wanted to talk about Ouran Host Club, which I see as a middle ground, and at least an appropriate representation for its circumstances. I adore this anime, as it was one of my first, and to this day I still watch it when I'm sad, and many of the episodes are a comfort for me. When it comes to its LGBT representation, I feel it falls flat on most notes, or at least would fall flat in 2021. We need to take it with a grain of salt, as this anime did come out in 2006. I personally view Haruhi as non-binary or gender fluid. I feel she's overall pretty good representation for a reverse harem, as typically they show a cookie-cutter bland main character, but Haruhi is quite unique. She doesn't care about gender, sees presenting as male a challenge to be taken on, and is incredibly independent. What I don't like about this is Tamaki's reactions to Haruhi's differing views. Whenever Haruhi dresses like a boy, Tamaki has a problem with it. He believes she should express her femininity and grow her hair out again, and that just hits a little too close to home. He also encourages her to remain presenting as male whenever she does present as female, because he doesn't want other boys looking at her sexually. This is problematic because it does not give Haruhi her own choice in how she presents. She's always working to please Tamaki in every moment, just because of the debt hanging over her head. The Lobelia Girls Academy is another icky example. I'm not particularly fond of these episodes as they're just boring to me, but what bothers me is once again how Tamaki reacts to the girls. They seem to be openly lesbian characters, and Tamaki is disgusted by this and says something along the lines of, "The Bible says Adam and Eve" or something, and this is never addressed. Finally, there's the issue of Haruhi's parent. I'll be saying parent and using they them as the show does not explicitly explain whether Ranka identifies as male or female. The host club learns that Haruhi's parent is essentially a drag queen or trans woman, and the T slur is actually used explicitly in both the subbed and dubbed versions. No one is uncomfortable with Ranka per se, but the use of the T slur irks me. A lot of these issues can be passed off as distastefully humor, as this show would be considered a comedy and maybe even camp, especially when it was released in a time where LGBT was not widely accepted in America, let alone in Japan. I think Host Club was on the right track when it came to introducing LGBT characters, but the characters were not handled well. So there we have it, some discussions of representation in the media. I really like doing these kinds of videos, and I hope to do more in the future. Who's your favorite example of queer representation? Tell me in the comments. And with that, I'll leave you to look at my pretty art. Look at it. Gorgeous, isn't it? So, this has been Squeegee with LGBT representation in the media, and I will see you next time.